Hey friends, Taylor Ince here, pastor of Sojourn Galleria Church in Houston. I've told my people that this Holy Week 2020, we're 3 weeks into the coronavirus, I give them a word from the cross each day, starting yesterday, Palm Sunday. This is 2020, April 6th today. Yesterday was April 5th, Palm Sunday, and that we're marching in Holy Week to the cross this Friday. And I said, hey, I'll give you, starting yesterday, a word each day from the cross. Christ spoke what theologians refer to as 7 words, 7 things from the cross while hanging on the cross. And the 4 gospel writers each say different things. Matthew and Mark say the same thing in different ways. And so we collect them together from the 4 gospel writers to see that Jesus said 7 things on the cross. And so I wanted to look at one each day. Because I'm not a techie, I'm getting better at this thing each day. I recorded one yesterday and I recorded one this morning, and I just can't get them online, so I'm trying a new platform, hoping this works. With no further ado though, I can go ahead and get started on the first word. But before I do, let me just say a bit of prep on why the 7 words. First of all, they're the 7 things that our Lord said while hanging on the cross, dying for us. And they're, in a sense, his last will and testament. He said them in a moment of excruciating pain, and so they say so much to us about who he is and was and what he came to do, his mission. And so this Holy Week we would do well to consider them. We won't have as much time as I want. These need to be fairly short, but I want to look at them. He said 7 things. 7 in the scriptures is the number of God. It's the number of perfection and completion. And so there's a sense in which we can say he didn't say, certainly he didn't say too much. It's not like he should have said 5 or 6 things. He said 7. There's a sense of completion. He said everything that needed to be said. He didn't say too much, and he certainly didn't say too little. And so we want to look at every single thing in the order in which we piece together that he spoke them. And, another thing that is really pertinent right now in this corona scare is that Jesus spoke these things in the moment, not a moment, in the moment of severe pain and torment and crisis, hanging on the cross in our place, not only being tormented physically and murdered and tortured, but and suffering extreme humiliation and shame in our place, but also enduring what we couldn't see, what the gospel writers take pains to explain, enduring the white hot just wrath of God against sinners, against our sin. And so he was in the ultimate cosmic train wreck, and I'll probably use that word multiple times throughout these next days, marching up to Good Friday. He was in the midst of taking upon himself the ultimate catastrophe. And it was out of that ultimate catastrophe that he brought us the ultimate goodness, which is reconciliation with our Maker and our Father and our friend. And so all that to say, God specializes in taking horrible things that don't make sense at all. The cross to Jesus' followers made no sense. Even to his scoffers, saying, if you're God's son, why don't you come down? Why would you ever stay up there if you're God's son? That means you're not God's son. Well, actually, it was that very instrument that he used to save them and to save us. And so God works mysteries and he works wonders, and he works, can I say this, his best things in the midst of catastrophe, in the midst of things that don't make sense. And so in the middle of this horrible, mysterious coronavirus, these words, I think, will be especially dear to us. They could not be more relevant. Okay, so let me go ahead now with no further ado and just mention 3 things about this first word from the cross. So Luke records it. It's in Luke 23, and the first thing that Jesus is recorded as saying is, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing, for they know not what they do. And the thing about this that's so outstanding, number one, just 3 points, is this tells us so much about what he came for. It's by no accident the very first thing that he says from the cross. And there's a sense in which not only does it encapsulate all the other things that he says, but it encapsulates his entire life and ministry, and certainly his entire death. It's the reason he came. It takes his mission and folds it into a very short statement. He came to forgive us of our sins. He came to take all the things that stand between us and God, we as guilty, rebellious sinners who've gone our own way, and to move them aside, to bury them, to pay for them, to take them upon himself and into himself, and through himself to make a perfect way for us to be reconciled to God, to be brought back to God, to be brought home, to be returned to the lover of our souls, our Father. And so if you notice, he says, so this is what, number one, this is what he came for. He says, Father, forgive them. Jesus is our go-between. And religions that don't have a mediator, don't believe in a mediator or a go-between, they tend to make one up. So we have a sense that we need something to go between us and a holy God who made all things, the Creator, and who is good and perfect and righteous and all-powerful. And Jesus, even in the way that he says this, indicates that he is that one. He's the only one that is a sufficient mediator. He says, Father. Jesus had the power to forgive. He showed that in his ministry, but he pleads to the Father because of his position as the only Son. We lost our position as sons and daughters through our sin. We estranged ourselves from God, but he who is not estranged pleads with all power, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He's standing in our place and holding God's hand, as it were, and holding our hands and connecting us through his broken body and shed blood. And another thing that we can extrapolate from this is that he didn't die. He knew that he wasn't dying for himself. He wasn't dying as a criminal for his own crimes. He wasn't dying because the Father put him on that cross to pay for his own sins. And we see that in this plea. He was pleading for us, Father, forgive them. Not Father, forgive me. In other words, I'm not dying for myself. I'm dying for someone else. I'm dying for others. I'm dying not only for others, but I'm dying for murderers. And that's the next point I want to get to right now. Second thing this first word shows us is that it shows us who Jesus came for. Not only did he die for people, for sinners, not only did he die for folks that have slighted God, that have done some bad stuff, most of it in private, most of it people don't know about. No. Who's he praying for here? He's praying for anyone who will come to him, but most obviously he's praying for his persecutors. He's praying for the Jews and the Romans and the world right there in front of him who are mocking him and who have put on a sham trial, who have cuffed him, who have beaten him within an inch of his life, who have whipped him with whips that have bone and steel in them, that have taken out chunks of his back, and who are shaming him now and who are murdering him unjustly. He's praying for them. In other words, let me put it this way, let me package it. Jesus came for the worst of sinners. There's no sin. This statement says, as he prays for his enemies who are murdering him, not only as he prays for them, as he says, Father, forgive them, and the Father does. He's praying. He's saying in that there's no sin that's too great, that he can't bring you completely reconciled and forgiven to the Father and make you a son or a daughter. There's nothing that you've done that's greater than his mercy that was purchased on the cross for you. And we also know, under this point, it shows who he came for. We know that his prayer was effective, as he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. We know that his prayer was effective because the Acts goes on to show, the resurrection accounts go on to show, and the book of Acts, the early church, goes on to show that forgiveness is offered to the very ones who crucified Christ, and many of them form the beginnings of the first church. And so we see that Christ's prayer reverberates throughout the early church and continues to reverberate even to us. That's why I'm speaking to you today, because the Father heard the prayer of his Son for me. And he hears it for you if indeed you come to him, or have come to him, or will come to him and look on him to be saved. And the other thing is that he didn't just pray for a few. Father, forgive the ones down there that are mine, that are following me, but that have scattered, or that are watching from afar and weeping. He prayed for everyone that he was looking at, and everyone on the face of the earth who would come to him by faith, who would know that he is the way that the Father has provided for us to be reconciled. There was no qualification. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And that's the other thing, is that the third point that the thing that this shows us is that what is his reason? He says, Father, forgive them. Why? For they don't know what they're doing. It just shows us so much about Jesus, that he was able. Most of us, we see the worst in people, period. We have a lot of grace for ourselves, but not for other people. But especially when we're being persecuted and ill-treated by others, which Christ was in the worst way here, we don't see the best in them. But I can't say he saw the best in them, but he reached down for something true about them, which was that what they were doing in ignorance, not understanding who they were crucifying, that they were crucifying one who, with a single word to the contrary, instead of Father, forgive them for they don't know what they're doing, he could have said, Father, look what they're doing and give them justice. And God, the Father, would have crushed all of them and we wouldn't have hope. But instead he said, look, they don't understand what they're doing, and that was true. And he saw something true, grabbed a hold of it, not even good in his persecutors, but true, grabbed a hold of it and used it to pray an effective prayer for us that means that we have a way to be forgiven and saved and reconciled now. He wasn't thinking of himself on that cross. Isn't that amazing? The first thing that he said that sort of encapsulates all of why he came, who he is, and all of his words on the cross as he was dying was for others. Man, when I'm in pain, I'm thinking of me, not Jesus. This shows us the heart of God. The gospel writers are clear that Jesus shows us in the book of Hebrews and others in the New Testament, Jesus shows us exactly what God is like. He shows us the heart of the Father. And the heart of the Father is, he's outward focused. He's focused on coming to get us, to reconcile us, to make us sons and daughters again. His arms are outstretched wide for any who will come to him by faith in his son, Jesus Christ. And so this word really shows us that. Tim Keller talks about how if you're in a wreck, a car wreck, and you wake up from the car wreck and you've been out for who knows how long, minutes, hours, and there's ringing in your ears and there's smoke everywhere and the car is destroyed, and you're somehow still alive, but nobody in the car with you is still alive, and they're dear ones of yours, perhaps family, they're all dead. What's the first thing that comes out of your mouth when you come to and see that catastrophe? The first thing that comes out of your mouth is not polished and it's not premeditated. It's from your guts, and it's who you really are. And Keller goes on to say that the cross is the ultimate car wreck. It's the ultimate catastrophe. And it's the worst thing that could have happened in history. We crucified the Son of God, and he is experiencing pain here that we will never understand. Not just the physical pain of the cross, but shame, and then becoming sin for us and enduring the white-hot wrath of God in our stead. And so what's the first thing that comes out of his mouth? In fact, as we'll see, what are the first three things that come out of his mouth? Prayers for others. Even in the ultimate cosmic car wreck or train wreck, the uber catastrophe, the eucatastrophe, as Tolkien would say, Jesus is thinking of us. He's thinking of others. And because of that, we are saved. And that's a demonstration of what the cross is. It's God thinking not of himself, but of others, and paying the ultimate price to win us back. So if I can say this, I need to close within a few seconds, but sort of as a bonus, as a PS or a fourth point, this also shows us, as it shows us the heart of God himself and of Christ, it shows us the heart of his people and what we need to be like. This word ought to characterize Christians. We ought to be ones who, because that grace and mercy has been extended to us, who pray that for other people, and the word on our lips ought to be, forgive them. As they've slighted you, as they slighted us, as they persecute us, we ought to be going after them like Christ did, with the Spirit of Christ inside of us. And the word on our mouths as a church ought to be continually, and pretty much only, forgive them. Jesus came to forgive you. Holding that out with our dying breath, and never, ever, ever letting this go. Proclaiming this word and living this esprit ought to be our mission. I'll see you for word 2.